Hi, I'm Lidia Lae, a psychologist, writer, and speaker, passionate about empowering people to lead meaningful, purpose driven lives. Welcome to another episode of Culture Shapers, where we explore powerful ideas and share inspiring stories from world experts, authors, creators, and influencers who are shaping culture and making an impact on society. Now, my guest today is Shannon Swales, a psychologist, speaker, author, and podcast host with the mission to empower midlife women to break free from burnout and embrace meaningful, lasting growth. As the founder of Burnout Psychology Support and the creator of Midlife Reclaimed, she strives to create a world where burnout becomes a turning point for transformation, not a life sentence. So, welcome today, Shannon. Now, please share with us more about yourself that I actually haven't covered here.
Hi, Lydia, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. And
Welcome.
what a lovely introduction as well. I'm like, oh, you've kind of nailed where I'm at. But I suppose a little bit more about myself. I, uh, grew up in Cairns, but mum and dad, one of four siblings, but someone who was always kind of gently curious about human nature, but didn't really know that till I
Mhm.
suffered myself through some anxiety and depression in my early or late teens. But it really catapulted me into this world of psychology and
Mhm.
the study of human behavior and really I was gravitated towards it because I wanted to understand human beings, but because I felt like I had no clue. Uh, and I didn't. But I also realized through that journey at some point of the studying, actually might have been afterwards, that really I was actually trying to discover myself and understand myself. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that, where I'm at now and what I do in my career was definitely formed in those earlier days of trying to make sense of my world, but yeah, through the study of human behavior. Hmm.
That's wonderful that this quest you had to understand yourself and others
Hmm.
in many ways led you to the field.
Hmm.
And I have to say, Shannon, I was so impressed when I read your book,
Hmm.
Nothing Left to Give, A Psychologist's Path from Burnout,
Hmm.
because you candidly discussed your experience with burnout as a clinical psychologist. And I know as a psychologist, we're not that vulnerable because we're trying to, project this persona that we have it all together, that
Yeah.
we're in optimum health because we're, guiding others or it's helping others. So when I read your book, it was
Hmm.
actually freeing because I know that there's a lot of other psychologists who have been burnt out, who are going through burned out, and who have recovered from burned out. But no one really talks about it because there's quite a stigma. And
Yeah.
I burnt out, in my late 20s as a psychologist.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had to, take a break, go and work with jewelry and
Yeah. Get
work
out of the field
with
altogether.
opals. Yeah, and just thought, wow, this is so different. And it's just, that process of then rebuilding ourselves. And it was actually through the research route back to psychology after I recovered.
Hmm.
And I've shared this with a lot of people, but for me to share it on that stage in the public
Hmm.
eye, I just thought it takes a lot of courage. So I
Yeah.
want to thank you for that coverage and
Oh,
that bravery.
yeah.
And you highlighting burned out is just really key for so many professionals, workers,
Hmm.
because it impacts the whole family.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
yeah, I want to ask you, what were the key signs that indicated you were approaching burnout? And how
Hmm.
did you decide it was time to take a step back?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I didn't have the language around burnout at the time. I didn't know of it, or I think I knew of it, but I didn't know enough of it. But I did know I wasn't okay. I knew I was constantly anxious. I knew I was probably, my mood was definitely down. The signs for me that I was aware of, and there were signs that my partner, my life partner, was aware of. So the signs I was aware of, which were really in the last stages before the wheels fell off,
Mm,
was not caring. So feeling that part of burnout that Maslach's definition of burnout, their categorization, which is that disconnection, or they call it
yeah.
depersonalization. I wasn't cynical. I was probably a bit, that's another one, cynical about my work, but it was more this depersonalization that I had distanced myself from the work,
Mm,
and which wasn't okay for me. That was a turning point because I was like, that's not okay. That's not what I want to be, with my clients. That I felt a lot of shame for that, and took me ages to verbally communicate that out loud. Like even today, like, oh, I'm amazed that usually there's a little bit of guilt or shame that still sits around, but there's nothing there, which is interesting. But
wonderful.
yeah, but it's one of these signs that we've burnt out in our, as psychologists, but in any area, whatever our responsibility or our, yeah, I say responsibility because it can be paid work or non-paid work,
Yes.
parenting, relationships, we're just feeling, so that was a big sign. And I wasn't feeling any pleasure.
Mm,
There was just nothing, even in things that usually would make me feel joy, just was nothing. And
mm,
I was withdrawn a long time from, doing things outside of work because I had nothing like chores. Uh,
mm,
I was doing them, but less so. And my husband noticed, my partner, I call him husband, partner, everything. But and I didn't notice this, but you're just totally irritable. You're snappy, you're distant, like
mm,
everything makes you mad. I can't do anything right. I was like, crap. And that was a turning point because
mm.
my relationship means everything. We've been together for years, but it's not because of
Yeah.
that. He's my best friend. And I was like, well, that's not okay too. So it's the relationship with the client, but the relationship with my husband, when I realized it was starting to affect them, because of that attitude, that depersonalization, and being absolutely distant from my husband, I was like, okay, something's got to change. This is not,
Yeah.
yeah.
And wonderful that he could be so honest with you, but so important because the signs that you raised, which I think it's important just to uh, for anyone to check that, are they depersonalizing? Are they having a lack of pleasure in their life? Are there
Mm,
behavioral indicators like what you mentioned, being snappy with your husband, and
mm,
all those signs, just so
mm,
important to check at the very beginning. And
yeah.
when I read the first entry of your journal, and
Mm,
by the way, I love your innovative approach to your book where you have journal entries and then tools and strategies to help readers. So I
mm,
thought, what a brilliant approach for a book, because it not only invites us into that personal space, because a journal is such a personal
mm.
space, but
Yeah.
to give the tools. And your entry where you were sitting with a client and then that thought that came to your mind, I
Mm,
am that client. And I thought, wow, that's very powerful because
mm,
it always comes as a thought, doesn't it? That first sight
mm.
and the
Especially, yeah.
feelings.
Yeah, especially for me because I was so disconnected, and a lot of people who are burnt out, I notice this, are disconnected from their neck down, like the body. So I was very in my head, and when the stress levels are up, and anxieties around, we tend to be more in our heads anyway. But so it was the thought that came to me first that I recognized, but I'm sure my body was telling me way before.
Yes.
But that was, as you mentioned, that entry, it just took me, like I can visually go back to that session, and after that session and how I felt. Yeah, I can even feel it now. Like it was really intense and a very powerful moment, very shocking moment, very confronting moment.
Mm,
Yeah, lots of things, but and again, often the shocking, challenging moments are the pivotal moments in terms of shifts, if you take it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could certainly see that shift in your journaling. And, you know, you emphasize the importance of journaling in your recovery process. So, can you elaborate on how journaling
Mm.
contributed to your healing and
Yeah.
why you recommend it as a tool for facing similar challenges?
Yeah, I'm very mindful. Like I wasn't a journaler, and psychologist who knows journaling can be a very powerful tool, but personally in my life was not using. So I feel a little bit, I don't know if fraudulent's the right word, but look, the message behind the journaling as a tool. So really, it doesn't have to be journaling, it can be something else. But I was looking for a tool
Yes.
that would help connect me, to my
Yes.
whole body. Like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What's going on in my body, sensation? What's going on in my world? I needed a tool to connect back to self because I was completely disconnected.
Yes.
And it just came to me quite quickly, journaling, because I am a creative at heart and writing is part of that. So I think that's why my brain went to journaling. And because I had that wisdom from psychology training. But for others, that I work with, it can be, or just talk to who are doing these things of connecting back to themselves. It can be meditation. It can be
Right.
lots of ways. But I found journaling personally really helpful, and particularly because we can journal in lots of different ways. But I wrote, and writing was really, really cathartic for me. The thing that it helped me do was not to run away from what was going on inside of me, because I was running away before. I wasn't facing. I
Yes.
was not just disconnected, I was avoiding through
Yes.
my busyness of life. Um, yeah, so it's why I talk about tools of connecting back to self, and journaling can be one of those ways. And I now still journal, but I don't journal as frequently, and I actually draw now. So there's lots of
Oh,
different ways.
wonderful.
Yeah, and I got sick of writing at one stage.
Yes.
And so I started vlogging, because that's what you do. So I started video logging my journals. So I just wanted to, share with the audience, there's so many different ways, and go with what feels, right for you to connect back to yourself, because connection is key,
Right.
but connecting in. And I was lucky enough to have this tool as well, and wisdom, which is mindfully journaling, because
Yes.
we can journal, but journal non-mindfully,
Yes.
which can be harmful. So yeah, so mindful journaling. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, no, that's key, isn't it? Being able to express yourself and not let what's internal, like all the different feelings and emotions that we're kind of pressing down, but to have a form of self-expression
Yeah.
that then connects the mind and the heart.
Mm,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what I found it did. It just really helped me connect back. And sometimes I would combine it with a meditation, or often I would combine it with an environment that was soothing. So it was usually my couch with a
Mm.
blanket and my doggies, or dog at that stage. I only had one then. I have two now. But or go out. Other people I know will go out in nature, and I did that a few times. So sometimes to help the nervous system be in a place to really benefit from connecting through the journaling, it's creating that outside environment too.
Yes.
And I just found, yeah, it helped me connect back to self, which often then the insight happened as to, oh, what do I need, and that step forward. So usually from my journal entry, it'd be not always, it wasn't
Mm.
about getting answers, but sometimes it might be like the day later, but it helped. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, that's wonderful because throughout your journey, you actually transition from prioritizing others to focusing on self-care.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, Shannon, what strategies did you find most effective from all the things that you shared? Because we talked about quite a number of different ones that you did medication, going out to nature, and
Mm.
I suppose it's different for each person. But for
Mm.
you, what was effective in making this shift, and how can others implement these practices in their own lives?
Yeah, because that shift from focusing on others, which was totally out of balance, can I say? Because focusing on others is an important part for ourselves as well, to give to
Right.
others, to be there for others. It's quite, um, it's healthy, but mine was out of balance, as a lot of people's are, particularly women, midlife. We tend to
I
be,
can
because
agree.
the cultural expectations and responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. But for me, yeah, there was so many elements, but I think that the thing that just comes to mind that helped me on my way was
Mhm.
having permission from another woman,
Yes.
a woman who had been there, and this was my supervisor at the time, who
Hmm.
basically gave me this, and I can't remember it verbatim, but she was basically saying, you do not have, and this was in the context of my work, that you do not have the capacity to care for others right now. Your
Yes.
duty to others now is to care for yourself, or something
Mm,
along those lines.
very
So,
wise.
yeah. And I don't like, I was in the, and still am in the position of, I don't have dependents like children. So, I know we can't withdraw ourselves from our children.
Yes.
That
Correct.
responsibility still is there when we go through this. But to stay away from that position of providing therapy as a psychologist, because I would have kept pushing,
Yes.
and kept putting others' needs above my own. Because for a variety of reasons, income, purpose, identity, all of that. I didn't have anything outside of work. But that permission helped me to shift focus and
Mm.
start to, even though as I did it, I was still feeling, oh, I should be, pulling.
Mm.
It's like, no, no, no. It's almost like I always think about it as a pendulum swing. I had to swing so far back to nurture myself, and allow others to nurture me too, because it wasn't just about self-care, but it was connection care receiving from others who were able to, and allowing that in, like my therapist, my husband.
Mm.
There wasn't many people, but there was some quality people there. Um, that was the time for that to help me get back to an equilibrium that worked for me in terms of that balance of others and self. And um, so I
Mm.
think it was the permission first, it was an constant permission, like continuing to come back to that this sounds by servicing yourself, but by taking care of yourself, you truly are caring for others. But that
Correct.
didn't sink in straight away. I had to take the actions of care for self to actually really believe it in my system and see the fruits of that labor. So
Mm.
the action of self-care, or the bringing care in, to really feel that. So that woman, which I'll name, like Dr. Hayley D. Quinn, another psychologist in our world, who was my supervisor at the time and still a really good friend. She just amazing. She
Mm.
saw it coming. She saw my burnout, and was really trying to help support me. And when I decided the wheels fell off and I no longer could work, yeah, that. And I kept
Mm.
that. I wrote that down and kept that up on a pinboard. Not sure if that answers your question, but that
Yeah,
permission.
no, it does. It's
Mm,
it's it's so vital that in many ways your focus on others meant that the key to unlocking you transitioning came from another person, a supervisor in authority who
yeah.
gave you that permission. And it's
Mm,
fascinating because that fine balance between self and others, because we know that we all live, not in a vacuum, but within a culture, right? And somehow along the way, you had this immersed in your mind, this culture of just giving, giving, giving to others without focusing on receiving and restoring yourself. So
mm,
when it was pointed out to you, and then you then allowed others
mm,
to nourish, to take that in, because I think so many times we're not very conscious of,
mm,
yeah, what we're doing. We can go on autopilot
yeah.
and burn ourselves out, but
Mm.
I love what you said that being then able to shift the pendulum, and it is a pendulum.
Yeah, I
It's-
think I like that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a lovely monitoring system where we feel like, oh no, that's a bit
Yeah, where
out
am
of
I? Yeah,
correct.
I've had too much on this side. Maybe I need some fuel on this side. Yeah. Mm, mm,
Yeah. And
mm,
that practice you have of being surrounded,
mm,
people who care about you. And I think
mm.
as psychologists, it's just so important to continue to
Oh,
walk with our colleagues, whether
yeah.
that be under supervision, peer supervision, but
Yeah.
yeah, allow others to speak into our lives.
Oh, definitely. And that's been a big turning point for my self-care, is building that network, because I didn't. I was such a as I think I named it in the book, toxically independent. I come from an individualistic culture and still live in quite an individualistic culture,
Yes.
but I'm building a different culture in my world, which is that connection and allowing that collective care in, and
Mm.
with coming back into the industry, being very mindful of building that. Because what stopped me in the past, besides that cultural modeling and expectations, whatever, was also I quite feared letting people down. I feared not being liked. And what that fear, when that was driving, which it was my whole life, I would avoid connecting. And
Yes.
so in my industry, particularly, not just in my outside life, because I'd say it was more pertinent in my industry because I saw everyone else as an authority figure, and that just makes it even worse for me in the past. I just head down, did my work,
Mhm.
had my supervisor. I don't mind some individual support and occasionally went to therapy. I can do that because it's private, only they know, they've got to be confidential.
Yes.
But I didn't. And now that's been the biggest thing, is that I've got people who are in the industry who get what we do, who understand the complexities and the difficulties, and who are willing to share their hearts, are willing to be vulnerable and share that with me too, the real stuff that goes on. So it's been, I'm still building that, but it's there. And that's, I feel, and a colleague, one part of a person in my network, Minky
Hmm.
Vanderwalt. She's a music therapist, social worker, like I keep always forgetting her title, but creative therapist. But she talks about collective care. And to me, that is self-care, but it's
Definitely.
care from that network coming in that is helping yourself. Yeah. So
That's
anyway, yeah.
cool.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, Shannon.
mm.
Shannon, as someone who has returned to the field after experiencing burnout, how has your perspective on mental health and professional well-being evolved? And what advice would you offer to fellow professionals to prevent burnout?
Yeah. It's how's it evolved? I'm not sure if this answers it, but what comes to me is that I mean, now it's at the forefront. My well-being, my mental health, my well-being is leads.
Yes,
Fear no longer leads, and about what's the right thing. Or like, it's like my mental health and well-being. So I suppose my perspective has changed, that it's no longer something I will sacrifice
yes,
for my industry or even my sense of self. Like it's like, no. So that has then transpired into how then I work.
yes,
I work very, very differently because how what I've got to learn about myself and what she needs and what nourishes her in this world of psychology is not what I thought I should be doing. So with that listening of myself, I've created, or in the burnout literature, they call it like crafting, job crafting.
I love
I've,
that.
I know I love it because it's creative. So I've crafted a work world that works for me and continue to check in on that, about, is that still working for me? Because, we're evolving creatures. I'm in my midlife, I'm going through perimenopause. So, things are always changing and shifting. And there's so much that goes on in this era as well. So, that crafting is not like a rigid thing. It's a constant or a continual review. Again, I'm not sure if this is answering the question, but that's just
No,
what
it is.
I need to share. And I lead with my values, which I think helps with all of that. A really significant moment that I recall when I was ready to entertain coming back to the industry, which was I couldn't even allow myself to think about it. It caused so much anxiety and I'd say trauma.
Yes,
Because I also had vicarious trauma as well, just thrown in there with the burnout. But I tabled that question, will I go back? And I even tabled the thought, I'll never go back, because that was a very present thing. But it was about 18 months after wheels fell off and I left the industry. Um, I felt ready to entertain the idea. And
yes,
I went to values because I'm an ACT trained therapist, so acceptance commitment therapy. So I went to and I employed the skills on me. I went to my values to be a bit of a guide to find, well, what did bring meaning and purpose to me when I was working in the industry? What was it about for me? What
Mm,
for me? And through that exploration, which was probably over a few months, these five or four key values came up, and that mapped and shaped my way back in. And I always come back to it. There's a fifth now, but it's what's shaped it. And I feel like that's a core skill that can be helpful for people with returning to work in any way is connecting into the values of that, you know, could be workplace, industry, career, whatever it might be, and to continue to use that as a compass point to explore if
mm.
still what matters and what's meaningful. So yeah, yeah.
No, but that's such powerful advice
Mhm.
because our values are like the foundation, the trampoline that we bounce off into life.
I love that trampoline. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
and very much our values is actually what co-constructs our very selves and the cultures we inhabit.
That's what yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so no, the powerful, powerful advice.
Oh,
I'm just so grateful, Shannon, for you sharing your experiences, your expertise.
mm,
And I just want to highly recommend to everyone again, Nothing Left to Give.
mm,
It's raw, it's candid, but it's full packed with strategies and tools.
mm.
And Shannon, it's just been a great pleasure having you on this Culture Shapers program and for you to share just honestly about what you've gone through, but lots of tips about how others could be helped if they're experiencing burnout or even midlife issues. And feel free to access any of Shannon's resources by clicking on a link that I have on my website. My website again, www.lidialae.com, where
Mm.
you'll actually have lots of other resources to help your journey and understand your cultural impact. And certainly what Shannon has shared today is impacting others. Others are being helped. They're identifying burnout signs earlier, being able to access, resources, but also get the professional support that they need. So thank you again, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast and learning what you're putting out and contributing to the world too. It's been really lovely and part of this networking and growing and meeting other psychologists and just people out in the world out in the world doing yeah what matters to them and what helps others. So thank you for allowing me to be part of your world.
It's a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for participating today on Culture Shapers.